The Honourable Trevor Mallard.
Speaker, the Labor Party will be opposing this legislation, which is consistent with the swing to the right and the anti-wage and salary earner swings of the National Party. And while I make some original comments later, Mr Speaker, I think what I'd like to do is quote back to the Minister from her own regulatory impact statement on the legislation. It starts by saying the analysis of the policy options under consideration is constrained by the limited availability of objective evidence of problems with the current holidays legislation. So her own department, which has got a lot of experience in this area, couldn't find a problem. And yet we have this legislation. Treasury and the Ministry of Economic Development, who I know from my experience have never been right at the front of the vanguard for wage and salary earners, say that these changes may not improve the functioning of the legislation. They note that the balance of costs and benefits of the package of proposed changes is not clear. At a minimum, amendments are likely to impose additional transitional costs on both employers and employees, and the extent of other potential costs is unclear. So what we have is that the agencies are meant to be looking after the economy, saying that this is not a good thing. It's something which moves us backwards. The regulatory impact statement also hints at the undue pressure on employees. It says, quote, there is also a risk that this proposal could create new employment tensions between employers and employees. And Mr Speaker, is that what we want? Is that what we want as a parliament? Is that what the Minister wants? Because it's what her own agency, her own report, the report of the Minister of Finance and Mr Brownlee say on this bill. It is one which is going to be bad, not good for the economy. On the question of sick leave, the regulatory impact statement is very frank here. It found no justification for it and says the Minister of Labour determined this proposal. Well, if we're going to work on evidence base, on legislation which people have worked through and know is going to work, then we've got to do better than saying Kate Wilkinson thought it was a good idea. Because frankly, Kate Wilkinson thinking it's a good idea against the evidence of the Treasury and the Ministry of Economic Development and the Department of Labour is an indication that it is poor. And there are a number of issues which are also identified in that regulatory impact statement. And I might say, Mr Speaker, it's pretty unusual to have an RIS which ends up being the core of an opposition speech on a bill. But what it does say is that it will reduce opportunities for rest and recreation away from work. So what this bill will do, according to Kate Wilkinson, in the impact statement that she has published, she says it will reduce opportunities for rest and recreation away from work. It also says it may increase working hours overall and decrease time for community and family activities. And again, no great surprise. Early childhood area, parental leave area. The National Party has been an anti-family party for a long period of time. But it's good to see Kate Wilkinson coming clean and admitting it. What she admits as part of the impact statement which she tabled with this legislation is that the increase in working hours overall and the decrease in time for community and family activities. She also says it may negatively impact on health and safety, including the increased risk of fatigue and stress-related illness, which could increase sick leave. Both employer and employees have responsibility to ensure staff are fit for work and not at risk from long-term fatigue. So what she does again is that she admits that this is likely to cause long-term fatigue and health and safety issues for employers. And I want to say this is not the Unite Union's approach on this legislation. It is the approach of the Minister of Labour in the statement that she tabled in the House. What she says, and this is no surprise, that it will disproportionately negatively impact on groups of workers who are already disadvantaged in the labour market. E.g., she says, women, low-paid, youth, Maori and Pacific peoples. And aren't they the groups that the National Party hates. The National Party doesn't like women workers. They don't like low-paid workers. They don't like youth. They don't like Maori and Pacific peoples. And the Minister of Labour tables in this House a statement that's saying that these are the people who are going to be disadvantaged by this legislation. Again, not the Labour Party, not Keith Locke, not the Unite Union, not the CTU. Kate Wilkinson is the person who says that these people are to be disadvantaged. It says it may increase the gaps in income between genders. Well, again, that's nothing that the National Party cares about. Even Pansy Wong didn't care about that before she added to the gap, the gender income gap over the last week or so. It says over time entitlements will be reduced. Workers may feel pressure to cash up holidays to meet financial commitments if they do not receive pay increases. And that again is something which Kate Wilkinson says will be a consequence of this legislation. And I just want to say to her, how could she, in all conscience, with all these negative consequences of the legislation, which she admits she's pleaded guilty to, she says, this is going to be the effect, and still she is proceeding with it. She says that net payment received may be less than expected if cashing up a week's annual holiday moves employee into a higher income tax bracket. It may reduce social assistance received, e.g. working for families. Now, did she tell the House that on her second reading speech? The fact that this is likely to reduce working for families? Did she say that as she introduced it, that people's benefits will be taken away or their tax brackets might go up as a result of this legislation? Did she say, as she spoke, as opposed to what she wrote and tabled, that it would decrease motivation and productivity if workers do not have adequate breaks away from work? What she says in the document that she tabled is that that is the case. And I want to say, why is she not prepared to stand up in the House and read out her own regulatory impact statement? It says it may impact on workplaces' budgeting, financial management if they've not planned for the additional payment. And what it also says is that it may increase disputes between employers and employees. For example, around the payment received for cashed-up holidays, whether agreements are genuine and if an employee believes their request has been unfairly declined. I reiterate, Mr. Speaker, all these statements are from the regulatory impact statement tabled in this House by the Minister of Labour. They are her statements as to the effect, Mr. Speaker, and I think it is absolutely shocking that we have a minister in the House who would bring legislation to this House that will so badly affect the way of lives of ordinary Kiwis in the way that this happens. And I say to Chris Tremaine, who's so much for voluntary work, for coaching, for people having time in their communities, how can he support the legislation from the Minister of Labour when she says it will reduce that time that's available? How can Chris Tremaine hold his head up at the Hawke's Bay Rugby Union when coaches are going to be pushed into working longer, as Kate Wilkinson's legislation indicates? Mr. Speaker, the last point that I would make is that in real terms, what this is going to do, it is going to reduce the wages and conditions of ordinary Kiwi workers. What this legislation is going to do is going to open the gap up between the workers in Australia and the workers in New Zealand. It is something that is designed to drive down those conditions, to make it cheaper for wage and salary earners in New Zealand. And Mr. Speaker, that is a clear breach of the undertakings that have been given by this Prime Minister. This is bad legislation. It is legislation that will be repealed. The core of this legislation will be repealed. I accept there are about 3 clauses in it that we don't object to. In fact, a couple of them are quite good. But the core of this legislation, the selling of the annual holidays, will be removed next year or early the following year by the new Labor-led government.
Call David Bennett.
Thank you, Mr Speaker.